We're at 38. Thanks for joining. So this is the Moving Communities Forward and Implementing Campaigns breakout session. So hopefully you've landed in the right room. Thanks for your patience as we navigated a hiccup. We're going to be talking about how we can successfully implement local campaigns for utility justice. We're going to get practical steps from 3 activists who are helping us out here today, talk about this, who've implemented local and state corporate social responsibility campaigns. We're going to be thinking about what the process is for holding communities accountable and how social movements can work toward getting this right. I'm Robin Lisowski, and I'm going to be facilitating this session. And it is my pleasure to introduce our panelists today. Shimekia Nicols is from Soulardarity. Shimekia was born and raised in the 48217. She is Soulardarity's leading organizer for the Work for Me DTE campaign, which develops community leadership and represents the campaign in media. She's dedicated to growing Black leadership in environmental justice work and ensuring that the pursuit of clean energy is just, equitable, and democratic. Thanks for joining us, Shimekia. Please let me know if I'm saying your name the way you say it. Elisheva? Can you hear me?
Yes, hello.
Yes, do you say Elisheva?
Elisheva.
Elisheva, pardon me. Elisheva Johnson from Emergent Justice is the director of Emergent Justice. Elisheva strives to be a beacon of light to her community and seeks solutions rather than excuses. It is her calling to develop affirming, warm, brave, and radical spaces for people when they are stuck in cold and unbrave circumstances. She acknowledges the experience of erasure, naming systemic oppression whose origins are found in racism, sexism, heterosexism, ageism, disability, and all other forms of injustice. Thanks for joining us, Elisheva. And from Wisconsin, where I'm sitting today, Huda Alkaff is joining us from Wisconsin Green Muslims. Huda is an ecologist, environmental educator, and the founder and director of Wisconsin Green Muslims, which is a grassroots environmental justice group formed in 2005, connects faith, environmental justice, sustainability, and healing through education and service. For over 2 decades, Huda has advocated for environmental justice, initiating Muslim and interfaith programs on energy democracy and water equity. Huda is the program manager at Milwaukee Environmental Consortium and the coordinator of Wisconsin Faith Communities for Equitable Solar. And she connects with over 8,000 people from 19 different faith traditions and spiritualities. For our order today, we've got about a 15-minute presentation from each of our panelists. And for our order today, we will go Shimekia, Elisheva, Huda. So Shimekia, if you are ready, will you please share with us your thoughts about implementing these changes?
Yeah, so just a little bit about myself. I'm the executive director over at Soulardarity, which is a pretty small nonprofit that's housed in Highland Park, Michigan, which is a small little city that's inside of Detroit, Michigan, if folks are familiar. Most of our work has been focused on implementing, well, let me start with some of our origin story. About 10 years ago, the street lights were repossessed in Highland Park. There were about 1,000 residential lights that were moved from the stumps in the ground. And this process came about because the city was said to have owed some debt. They were actually going through emergency management during the time. And there was a lot of people just in terms of, processes and recalibration and even why they were under emergency management in the first place. DT Energy is our investor-owned monopoly energy company that services Southeast Michigan. And this is a $1 billion company that decided to instead work with the city or work with some type of community input process with residents to just simply remove the lights, leaving the city completely in the dark. To date, those lights have not been replaced. And so Soulardarity has built a reputation on trying to fundraise, crowdfund, solicit for grants and to foundations to pay for solar-powered mesh Wi-Fi streetlights to replace those. At this point, we are still only at super close to about 20 lights because these lights are pretty expensive. It is capacity intensive to be able to manage these installation projects. And we wanted to be very intentional about the vendors that we use to purchase the lights, manufacture the lights, and as well as the actual project managers and installers. So there is one small Black-owned company in Highland Park called Ryder Cooperative Industries, and we've worked with them as well as another company a little farther away in Ypsilanti called Solartonic. And through a lot of collaborative projects, we've been able to do those solar light installs, and the testimony of our work was actually featured on the Today Show most recently. So that's a little bit about our background. As we were attempting to replace the street lights, we realized that it wasn't just the physical lights that needed to be replaced, but a trust in the process for democracy, and specifically energy democracy. And through that work, we were able to create a document called the Blueprint for Energy Democracy. And one of the main pillars of that work is the principle Kujichagulia, or self-determination, because the residents, our member base is majority Highland Park residents and Detroit residents. And so what we spent a lot of time doing was political education events, workshops on how to do power mapping, coming up with our theory of change, and all of the other organizational things that needs to be done in order for us to be able to work in coalition with other environmental justice organizations. And most recently, we began to explore some ideas around doing grid equity work for the Midwest region. So that allows us to be able to not only continue to hold politicians, especially our state legislators, responsible for policies that are impacting a just transition for clean energy, but it also allows us to be able to partner with other states. And MREA, the Midwest Renewable Energy Association, is one of those really strong values aligned partners. I said no. I said no. I'm sorry, my son is here. So if I seem distracted a little bit, it's because he's looming behind the camera. So yeah, so that's a little bit about our organization. We have a really small but dope team of activists and organizers who are committed to ensuring that BIPOC communities like ours that have usually been left out of the conversation of clean energy and progress towards clean energy future, making sure that those voices are heard.
You're on mute, Robin.
Apologies. I was just saying thank you, Shimekia, and noting that we're actually running pretty ahead of time already. And so if, we'll have questions at the bottom of our individual, of your individual remarks, but I think we're pretty good on time already. So if you've got afterthoughts, please feel free to share them. Elisheva, are you ready to share with us?
Yes, hello everyone. Hello, Ms. Shimekia. It's good to see you.
I know, it's good to see your face too, Elisheva.
My name is Elisheva Johnson. I am the Executive Director of Emergent Justice, and we are a digital and storytelling organization that is issue-driven, and we would love to tout ourselves as the storytellers of the movement. So let me tell you a little bit about who we are. Emergent Justice is a non-profit social justice organization. We are dedicated to challenging injustice and empowering communities to address issues that affect our lives. And those issues look like the school to prison pipeline. We do other campaigns around reproductive justice for all, which is of course Roe versus Wade. And also we have an actual bill that is moving through the House, SB 487. We don't know what that bill will be named next year, but it is for the conditions of the women that are housed in the only women's facility in Michigan, Huron Valley. And so we do have commutations for a few women that are inside of the jail, inside of the prison, and we also have a commutation set up for women who are outside in the community to come to us, and we will support them. We do a lot of work that intersects with the Clean Energy Act, and of course, as we know, there are the work that we do and community organizing is definitely layered with all of the issues that we deal with. We don't deal with like one issue lives. So we do criminal justice reforms, but we also understand that the people that we're dealing with come from poor communities and are the same people that Shimekia organizes with as well. So we understand that the connections here. And some of the basic foundations of organizing is, of course, is giving the voice to the people, right? And I understand that is people need information. People need to understand the laws in which they are being affected by, the people who they're electing to serve them in their communities, what they stand for, what they really stand for, what do they get done? And I think as community organizers, it's our place to do that. And if you were to look at any poor person like myself who is living in the community, again, we don't have one issue lives. And I bet you, when you start to look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it is housing, it is clean water. It is first those basics of the work that Shimekia does. And so if we're not healthy, if we're not mentally stable, if we don't have housing, if we don't have resources and food, then we can't get out and lift up our voices. So I think the first thing we need to start with is just like strengthening our people, right? Making our people fight ready, right? As warriors. And how do we do that? We share information with them. We figure out what it is that they believe is the solutions to the issues that they face every day. And I think we can all do that, no matter what different lanes that we work in, whether it's criminal justice reforms, whether it's clean energy, whether it's victims' rights and work. It is all connected, and it's usually addressing the same groups of people over and over, right? It's usually the same groups of people who are dealing with these different issues. And so I think that if we were to come together and align ourselves with first making our people strong and strengthening them, we can all do that together. And I am very open and leading the conversation and how we get that started and how we can all start to unite our different causes to first do that foundational thing. Thank you all for your time. I don't want to take up too much space because I know y'all got a lot of questions for Shimekia still. I see them coming up.
Great, thank you so much, Elisheva. Huda, are you ready?
Yes, and I think Maggie, I don't see Maggie here, but
I am here and I'm getting
you're
your
here.
slideshow going right now. Let me share my screen real quick. All right, and Huda, if you just want to let me know when to advance the slides, I'll just do it on your call.
Yeah, thank you very much, Maggie and Robin. Thank you for Elisheva and Shimekia. So yeah, so I'm Huda Alkaff. I'm the founder and director of Wisconsin Green Muslims and the coordinator of the Wisconsin Faith Communities for Equitable Solar Initiative. And in the next slide, I show that our work for 17 years now, Wisconsin Green Muslims, we work on as a very intersectional, as we all know, issues are. So we work on environmental justice issues as they relate to climate change, clean air and pure water, healthy food, solar energy and energy efficiency, waste reduction, and transportation equity. We intend to educate the Muslim community and the general public about the Islamic environmental teachings, to apply these teachings in daily life, and to form coalitions with others, with everyone working toward a just, healthy, peaceful, and sustainable future. Our website is wisconsingreenmuslims.org. And then in the next slide, I really go into the dark, into the darkness, and see this is where we are. I mean, many situations I feel that way. when things are really tough, when we have shutoffs, when we have our power is taken away from us, when it's top-down control, when we are really facing the darkness of environmental injustice and climate injustice. That's what I feel is I need power, and I'm sure many of us feel that way. So from the place of darkness, how we can move on to the light that we have, to the power that we have moving forward. So in the next slides, I address that way, and but we need to really realize what's the basic, what's the center of that darkness. Well, the pillars of the extractive economy are the center of the darkness. And according to Vandana Shiva, it is not an investment if it's destroying the planet. So we really need to see what the investments are and what are they doing to the people and to the community and to the planet. So according to the Climate Justice Alliance and the Just Transition movement here is that we must build a visionary economy that is very different than the one we are now in. And this requires stopping the bad while at the same time building the new. We must change the rules to redistribute resources and power to local communities. Just transition initiatives are shifting from dirty energy to energy democracy, from funding highways to expanding public transit, from incinerators and landfills to zero waste, from industrial food systems to food sovereignty, from gentrification to community lands, from military violence to peaceful resolution, and from rampant destructive development to ecosystem restoration. And core to a just transition is a deep democracy in which workers and communities have control over the decisions that affect their daily lives. And to liberate the soil and to liberate our souls, we must decolonize our imaginations, remember our way forward, and divorce ourselves from the comforts of empire. We must trust that deep in our cultures and ancestries is deep knowledge and diverse wisdom that we need to navigate our way towards a world where we live in just relationships with each other and with the earth. So we move forward in the next slide into what's happening here and where are we and why are we here? And so I bring up the Energy Democracy Project, which Wisconsin Green Muslim is a member of, and also Soulardarity and others. So we understand that the centralized energy model is part of this extractive economy. We know that why we're forming this Energy Democracy Project on a national level, why we're doing this energy democracy work on the local level, why we collaborate in doing that, because we cannot do otherwise. We have to collaborate because of the intersectional issues. So we're working towards a decentralized, democratized, equitable, safe, resilient, reliable, and sustainable model. So how can we do that? It's a lot, but it's the power from the bottom up that should counter the top-down control that's really controlling everything right now. So moving on, next, please, here is the Energy Democracy Project strategic convening that took place in Detroit. Hey, Detroit, in 2019, and I'm there in the bottom left corner. So yeah, here we came together and to strategize how we can do the work on the national level and how we can really center our work on the ground in where we are. Next, we look at other, what does, according to the People's Power Solar Cooperative, which is one of the members of the Energy Democracy Project, is that what is the community power? How does it look like? Well, it needs to be centered into relationship, centered into stewardship and control and ownership. So that's what community power, that's what we're working on individually and collectively together to have this bottom-up power. Next, we look at, so in Wisconsin, with the Faith Communities for Equitable Solar Initiative that that I'm coordinating, we asked the question is, how can the unifying power of energy, solar energy, help overcome Islamophobia in Wisconsin? So this is the darkness that we are countering with light, with the power of light. So we look at the Just Solar guiding principles rooted in our collective values of justice, equity, and inclusion. And we asked the community, we did over many listening sessions and connected with now over 8,000 people in Wisconsin. And we're asking the questions, what are the barriers and bridges for a just and equitable solar power? And we landed with the community through these listening sessions into two pathways: energy efficiency to solar, so energy efficiency first, that leads to solar. And then the second pathway is solar trainings to jobs. And as with Soulardarity, we also a partner with the Midwest Renewable Energy Association with the Rise Up Scholarship to really provide these solar trainings that can lead to jobs. But so we're really trying to provide this opportunity to disadvantaged communities that have been left behind for so long. The next slide, please. Here we are. I'm just bringing it back again visually, is that we are moving away from the darkness of all these powers that are really holding us back into the power of light and love, because that's how we counter hatred. And next slide, please. And with that, this is just an overview of some of our activities in Wisconsin. So here's the 8,000 people in Wisconsin for over events that have connected with them, listening sessions, whether it's one-on-one or group conversations, all addressing what Just Solar is, what the people's power is, listening from the people, getting the guidance from the people, for the people, by the people, connecting with 19 different faith traditions, connecting it with the water, because water and lights are the commons and our sacred trusts and sacred gifts. And in the bottom left is one of the projects that were completed, the Faith and Solar projects, where this was community-led, community designed to address a problem with community garden, where they could not have water to irrigate their plots, their rented plots. This is in Milwaukee, Lindsay Heights neighborhood. And so the design was, okay, let's harvest the rainwater into underground cisterns, and then we can filter that water and make it accessible. But how can we get the water from the underground up? So came the solar aspect, and we designed that project for the solar part. And therefore the solar came as pumping energy out for water, and now the solution was provided for the community by the community to address the water issue. And now it's became the community strengthening community, creating access to food, access to water, and energy. So that was a really powerful example of the community-led project. Next, please. And then another initiative that we worked on is in 2020, when the power shutoffs were taking place. So we collaborated with many of partners to really address the Public Service Commission to extend the utility shutoff moratorium. So we did many comments and a rally to really push forward. So that was originally the heat and power shutoff moratoriums were going to be lifted before winter, but then we pushed to extend that. So, and we succeeded. So that was a success story to really, through the power of the people, to keep the power on and extend the heat and power shutoff moratoriums to April 2021, which took several rounds through the Public Service Commission. but that was a success story that was led by the people. And so yeah, that was something that we really managed to ask the Public Service Commission, and they voted 2-1 to extend the utility disconnection moratorium for residential customers. And so now we're looking into what's happening this year. So next. And now we are addressing another issue with the Public Service Commission, which is that there is a rate case, since we're talking about utility justice here. So the We Energies is one of the largest utilities in Wisconsin, investor-owned utility, and we really are facing a rate case increase. And so what is it asking for? It's asking for an increase to electric and gas rates from 8 to 11%. And so raise electricity revenue by 8.4%, raise gas revenue by 10.7%. And that's what they're coming in with that. So ahead of We Energies is really claiming that that this intended increase in electricity and gas for their customers is because they are building more clean energy. But how come they are simultaneously announcing their plans to keep expensive coal plants running and to invest in new fossil gas infrastructure? So that does not add up. And then who's most impacted by this increase? Yeah, all We Energies customers will have to pay for these increases, but the Black, Hispanic, and Latinx neighborhoods will be disproportionately harmed by those costs. And we can see in the next slide what is that? That's the energy burden. So the energy burden is the amount of your income you spend on utilities and the households, as I mentioned, who will be more impacted are those neighborhoods who are, as we see here in the slide, who are paying more of their income towards electricity, and those will be most harmed by the increase in this rate case. So there is mobilization around that. There's our public listening sessions that took place, and successfully we extended the deadline for that. So there was a rally on October 15, rally for affordable energy, and then there is an in-person public hearing tomorrow, 2 sessions. We're really asking everyone to attend and support, and then public comments continuing on to November 7th. So they're really coming very quick, and that's what we are facing right now. Next slide, please. So now is the time. So everyone can build solar everywhere, and we can own it and control it. So how we can move, really make that a reality. That's what we are working on with the Wisconsin Faith Communities for Equitable Solar. And we are really looking forward to partnering with everyone to make this a reality. Yeah, with that, next slide. It's just saying that this is Wisconsin Green Muslims, connecting faith, environmental justice, sustainability through education and service since 2005. Thank you very much.
Hey, Maggie, if you wouldn't mind going back maybe 3 or 4 slides in Huda's deck, I just want to point to a spot.
Let me pull it up real quick. Okay, let me share my screen again.
I'm sorry, I should.
Oh no, you're good. Okay.
So,
was it? Do you remember which slide it was?
The one with the rain or the water images in the garden. There we go.
Perfect.
On the bottom left quadrant of Huda's slide here is she noted, is Alice's garden, and it's just such a special place in Milwaukee, and it was a settlement site of the Underground Railroad. So it has all of this environmental significance, and Venus, who manages the garden, is extraordinary, and then it has that history too. Huda and I have actually had some opportunity to spend time there in another coalition together, so this one just really caught my eye. Thank you, Huda, for sharing this.
Yeah, this is our office is located across the street from this community garden. So it's definitely a great local demonstration of community power that we are proud of. Yes. Mhm.
Thank you. Thank you, Elisheva. Thank you, Huda. Thank you, Shimekia, for sharing your stories. I've got some scripted questions, but that doesn't mean we can't ask or volunteer other remarks too. So we've got until 40 to kind of share some questions and answers. I think we are kind of caught up in the chat in terms of we're kind of commenting to each other, right? So, you know, we are Midwest Building Decarbonization Coalition is a coalition itself. We work together, come together to build some trust so that we can do things believing in the power of coalition. When you're thinking about working in the community, in your organizations, in your communities, how do you think about building trust? And what do you do tactically, strategically to build trust, right? Like, I think we talk about the goal, we sort of say a lot of times that trust you need it at 60,000 feet, and we all nod and agree, but how do you do it? Like, how do you roll up sleeves and build trust?
So I'll take it, ladies, if that's okay. And then I'll pass it along. Thank you.
Please do.
This is one of my favorite questions because I think this is a really important question that as an organizer, as a community organizer, you really have to have great and deep intention around is building trust. And I believe that, first of all, you build trust at, trust is built at the speed of the folks, right? So like, if I might need something done in a month, right? I'm not going to go in like, oh, I got to build this trust in a month, right? It is built at the people who are dealing with the issues speed. And I had to learn that. That was something that I had to learn as a new organizer when I first started this about 13 years ago, is that the trust is built on the speed of the group. And in respect to the speed of the group, you have to take that time. Because once you do that, once there is real trust that is built, then everything else is really fast. I think what that looks like is listening intentionally, right? And not bringing in our kind of views to the people and the way that we believe that things should be done. Because like, I'll give you an example. I was working with a group of women and we were doing some visioning around what we thought a new prison for women, a new mental health facility for women could look like, right? And the women who were in the group, they just weren't ready to think outside of the box that had been made for them. And so we spent time, once we saw, we were like, okay, well, so we thought we would be able to build an analysis, but maybe we should step back and do some analysis building, right? And, hear everyone's stories and take real time with like, how does capitalism work? So we have to dial back a bit and then take time. And it was a lot of time. It was like us a year, like it ended up being us a year of building trust, and we needed to get shit done, y'all. Excuse my language. But I am so glad that I took that whole year to do that, because after that was done, everything in the campaign moved really quickly because people had already trusted me. So I appreciate you all.
Great. Shimekia, I see you coming off mute.
I already knew she was going to touch on the immediate things that like came to my mind. To just add on to moving at the speed of trust and moving at the speed of the people in which you're serving. I think one word that I didn't hear her say is humility. Like it definitely takes humility to come into a neighborhood that you may not live in. And an example I'll give is, I wasn't a resident of Highland Park. And so I assumed since Highland Park was inside of Detroit, it was the same thing. And what I learned was that it was not, that this was a community with very unique needs and experiences, and being open to self-transformation myself was how I was able to connect with this community and connect with folks that I didn't have shared experience with. You know, I wasn't a retiree, you know, I wasn't at that time a homeowner. There were a lot of different identities that I wasn't immediately just able to connect with just because we all had Black and brown skin, or just because, you know, our income levels were similar, or just because we all were experiencing hardship by the oppression from our utility company, that it was more than that. And so one of the things, I think Maggie put it in the chat, where as an organizer, you can come in like this is a job, and you have to meet these deadlines. You have to make sure that your grants are in. You have to make sure you are meeting the deliverables of a particular grant or a particular funder's request. But that's not the point of any of this. Like, the point of this is to transform ourselves and our communities. And that can only happen in a symbiotic relationship. And so I would say, additionally, a couple of other touch points is, Elisheva spoke on intersectionality. You know, if you're, especially when you're talking about like clean energy or something that is a line of work that could easily be compartmentalized, you know, to not see the intersections in terms of healthy homes, governance, gentrification, you know, like there's so many other things that needs to be considered in this line of work, and in all of our lines of work, no matter whether it's environmental justice or whether you're trying to start a business. Like, if you don't understand things in a more secular nature, and you only have kind of a linear lens, then you're 9 times out of 10 not going to be able to establish that trust. And the last point that I want to make is honoring our frontline leadership. You know, we're a bottom-up organization, and so we look at, if we're all sitting at the table with DTE attorneys, engineers, ourselves, and residents, to us, the experts, just based on lived experience, are the residents and our members. And I think that in this industry, especially as federal dollars are coming through the pipeline, for us to be able to build new infrastructure, we really should do way more allocation of resources to, you know, those Black-owned business owners that are trying to do solar installation, or the women-owned businesses that are seeking to do like trauma healing, you know, as we're kind of making this transition. And just really honoring them, and then really just having respect for the origins of how we got here in the first place. Like, the energy justice movement was started out of acts of resilience for people who were already just suffering. And so if you come into this work like, I'm going to dictate to you the solutions for your community, you already failing. If you come into a community and only come with like well intentions, you're going to fail. It takes you actually coming as your whole self and understanding that we've all been traumatized by, you know, the journey of how we've all gotten here, and that the only way for us to all survive this is going to require us stepping outside of our comfort zones and doing things a little bit different and learning from one another. And I think the best spaces that I've been a part of, and seeing that for myself, coming from just being a ratepayer and a mom and a first-time homeowner, to the point where I'm at now, was being welcomed into spaces where my culture, not just my identity, not just my pronouns, but my culture was actually respected. You know, my values, my principles, the way that I was raised was actually respected and heard. And I would say accessibility, language accessibility is also a really big thing, like especially in a predominantly Black community, where if you require folks to have to use certain acronyms, organizational language, technical terms, if that's a requirement, you're already cutting off the ability to be able to communicate with folks who don't speak that. And so just being aware of that language accessibility, I think, is really important. And I'm gonna stop talking now, make sure we make some space for more questions and more responses.
Yeah. Huda, is there anything you'd like to add on building trust?
Building trust, definitely, as I mentioned, that through listening sessions, that was like a key thing that we centered our work around. But I want to also share this model that worked for us. Here, if you can see my screen, this is the open circle model that worked for my my group. Is that we act as like not we don't do everything, but we respect what people's need are, and they are the ones who take ownership and leadership of the projects that impact them directly, and we provide facilitation and guidance and that kind of thing. So so that's why we are a small group, but our volunteer and leadership groups are larger than what we are, because we connect with different groups and organizations that way. So it's an open circle model so we designate a theme for each month, and that's based on the community, what they tell us about what their need and what's happening in their community. And we move through each month of each month that helps us to focus on the need for that month or the activities throughout that month. And this diverse approach, as I mentioned, it enables us to connect with a variety of people who join this open circle at the point of entry that matches their interest. And whether it's water equity with lead or PFAS, which are forever chemicals, in March, or others, and other pollution issues that affect vulnerable population, community vegetable gardens with families participating in intergenerational exchange of knowledge that takes place, solar energy and energy efficiency with engineers, facility managers coming into the fold, friendly recycling competitions with robust youth participation, or transit equity issues with senior students and people of disability concerned about transportation access and affordability. So we meet people where they are, but also they are the ones who tell us which of these issues that they want to work on, and they take leadership of that model. And so that worked for us over now 17 years of our work. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Huda. Did I miss a hand, Sheila? Did you have your hand up a bit ago?
Yes, I did have my hand up a little while ago. I appreciate you folks, and Hoda, you've done such a great job today. I was in one of the breakout sessions with you earlier, sharing our story and telling our story, and how we get there is something that I appreciate you folks sharing with us today. We're doing grassroots organizing here, particularly in Fort Wayne, but specifically in the state of Indiana. And one of those things with building trust, we've taken the approach of the church, and trying to bring the church into this fold to educate them so that they can tell their story and understand what we're trying to do as far as electrifying and decarbonizing their buildings. Some of the things that you folks have shared with us today is that building relationships along with that trust. That's one of the barriers that I have here, being in a Republican state. And you know, I mean, I'm an elected official. I serve as the 1st District County Councilwoman. So I see this from a lot of different perspectives. So my thing with building that trust, how can you share with us, how do we get to that next level? Because we have the people in the room. How do we get to that next level? Because I have some folks on this call that I would like for you to share your story of your next level. Thank you.
I'll just jump in there because I guess I got the mute button quickest. I would say, you know, when our organization transitioned from just simply installing, attempting to replace the street lights, and we realized that we needed to go a little higher up the food chain in order to make more strategic and more sustainable impact. It was a learning curve for us to actually learn like conflict management in this field. And when I say that, like being able to show up and know for a fact, like you're different in the room. You may have different values, you may have different agendas, and still being able to mitigate that conflict by being, and again, just leaning back on like the theme of this convening, which is self-determination. There were a lot of spaces that I entered that I didn't feel very comfortable in. I leaned into that comfort, and I knew that it wasn't just me in that room, it was all the folks that had the same story as I did, and that this was an opportunity for that story to be heard. And so I stood my ground. And although, again, I didn't speak the same language, and I may not have been as appealing as, let's say, a white male, you know, in that room, I stood firm in who I was, and I was able to continue to lean on, even when I didn't have the voice for my own story, lean on all the stories that came with me. And that was how we were able to impact and make some changes. Huda spoke on the work with dealing with the Public Service Commission, which is a really intimidating space. Like one, in Michigan specifically, it was definitely not accessible. Like they had never even come to Detroit to hold a public comment hearing or anything like that. Most folks, when we surveyed, had no idea what their job was, but yet there was this entity that was able to make decisions for us or on our behalf. And one of the things that we did was, based on the very first question, is build the relationship by just simply continuing to bug them, like, come to Detroit. You know, we would mobilize as quickly as we possibly could. We would fill the room up. We would make sure that we fed people and carpool people to meet them and to see and to begin putting faces behind the stories, you know, that I know for a fact that they have been hearing for a while, even with the lack of understanding of what they did. And I would say we did not win. So Soulardarity did win a settlement. We actually were the only nonprofit organization to intervene in a rate case. And so again, like showing up in spaces where we knew we would be different, but just still showing up in those spaces anyway, and just like putting it in people's faces, like what the real issues were for us. And then there was a demand. We also are going through an additional rate hike with DTE. And we're legally intervening on that case, and we are still collecting. We're kind of on a similar timeline as Wisconsin in terms of needing to get public comment in. One of the things that we noticed was just like the mannerism of the commissioners this time versus years ago. We did the Work For Me DTE campaign, and we got like 3,000 signatures and comments, and you know, really like blew their minds in terms of our capacity because we were also small at that time. But the reception is totally different now, you know, and decisions are being made differently, and support is being provided, you know, from Dana Nessel, you know, and folks that actually like can put weight, you know, behind some of the things that they knew to be true, but didn't feel like they could actually enact it on their own without pressure. So I'll stop talking on that one. I know Elisheva got some stories on that one too.
I feel like something's percolating here. Elisheva said earlier that we don't live one issue lives, and the communities that you're working with don't live one issue lives. And the chat is getting some love about information gatekeeping. In technical language, things that keep people out. You shouldn't need a handbook to have a conversation to talk about your energy righteousness, so that you get the vocabulary right. When we're working with each other who don't have one issue lives, how do we focus? What are some successful ways you've experienced in your work to prepare and equip people with what they do? You know, maybe not the handbook of vocabulary, but what can we give them on clean energy? What can we give them? What can you give them? What have you given them in terms of preparation for having building decarbonization potency so that there can be a win? What works?
Huda, do you
Anybody
want
can? Elisheva or Shimekia or Huda, who wants to tackle that one first?
I feel like Huda should, because I think that there's been like mass successes and wins on that side. I think we spent a lot of time fighting, and we don't get an opportunity to do as much building new as we would like. But if they don't want to, go, I can speak to just a couple of different things we've done at Soulardarity.
Go ahead.
Okay. So an example would be, we had a super tight deadline to prepare for an upcoming visit from the Michigan Public Service Commission. Like I said, we were beating at their doors and asking why they had never come to Detroit, knowing that the energy burden was so high there, and why meetings were being held out in the suburbs, like during a working day, with all of the issues and barriers that created. So once they finally came down, we had 2 weeks, I think, to actually mobilize our people. And so what we did was multiple education sessions. I think we had like three or four, where we used slide decks that translated the language. It just broke down what the utility was actually asking for in a way that made sense. We use analogies and storytelling as a way to convey something that may seem dauntingly technical when you hear a so-called expert say it, but like really it's like, your lights are not going to be able to stay on, or you're not going to be able to crank the heat up a little bit more this year because of these other impacts. And we were able to still kind of teach about like technical things such as like hardening, and where they're actually trying to bump up the actual power lines so that they can generate more energy, so that I think it's for them to make more money and also just kind of keep chaos going. But also it's a way to sort of improve our infrastructure. So just using terms that they may have never heard before, but introducing them in a way that was digestible. I would also say another thing that we do is give people like the lived experience. So when we decide to go to Lansing, we take a bus full of folks that may have either never left their city or never understood like the process. And it's like, you don't have to understand it, just show up with us. And just having them live that experience and be in solidarity with us taught volumes, and by the time we're on the bus ride back, people are like articulating their perspectives on like things that they at first didn't feel that they had an opinion about.
Cool. So like electric justice buses to Lansing, best practice, right? Huda, is there anything you want to add to that? Like ways to make the information that we need to have energy conversations with those who are controlling that energy just much more accessible and digestible and relatable and usable?
Yeah, I was reflecting. I'm because we work on many issues. So one of our main issues is water. So we work with a communication strategy organization that really looks at what are the water words that are out there, and how we can make them more accessible. So instead of talking about discharge or watershed or just those words that really community is like, what? Why do we get stuck in those words? So I'm thinking the same thing is needed to do with energy. It's just taking what are the words that really we can communicate. Even if you use more words, that's fine. But just communicate what you're talking about. Don't get stuck into acronyms or words because they don't mean anything to the community and you create barriers. So I really want to benefit from the experience that I did with the water to take it into the energy and really look at those words that are a barrier for in the communications. And we spend time explaining them why. If we are prepared ahead of time and just make that a glossary or vocabulary that's really explainable and in simple words, and make them part of our language, and that's, I think, will help a lot, make it more relatable. Yeah.
Thanks for that. I mean, I think that's a takeaway from this conversation already, right? Unfortunately, folks, I think we lost Elisheva. We're noticing that she's not in here, so I think she might have been traveling. Hopefully she can join us again. We're kind of in the home stretch here with about 7 minutes left of our time together. I'm noting that one of the things that Shimekia offered in the middle of our conversation today was to have humility in this. And I'm wondering if you have thoughts on where this movement might be getting it wrong. Are there misconceptions or ways, have we gone down a road? Shimekia was talking to my heart when she said they started doing theory of change work and thinking about, you really have to organize, start to figure out what your North Star is, organize toward it and have some formality and organization around that. Kind of thinking about that with humility, is there any place we've just gone down the wrong path and have to kind of stop in our tracks and think about like, oh, maybe that's not the way to have the most success in our social movement toward building decarbonization, because that's why equitable building decarbonization, because that's why we're here today. And what do you do about it?
I would say, I think humility is something that only you can kind of measure. Like, I can tell someone else I think they're being ungrateful, or that they're like acting out of privilege, or that they're creating barriers. But I think humility is something that has to be self-assessed. And so I think like being willing to be vulnerable enough to assess yourself in that way, to answer the broader question of like, where are we getting it wrong? I don't think that there isn't enough humility, to be honest. And when I say that, I mean folks that are open and vulnerable and willing to do that self-assessment and willing to come back to the table and say, hey, we were doing that wrong. And I don't think that there's enough value being placed on grassroots organizations that are creating new structures, new frames, new processes that should be implemented on a much bigger scale. So an example of that would be, we have a program called the Extended Advance Program. Because we're a small organization, we don't have a healthcare plan, and things like that. What we decided to do was put funds into a pot, and we have a collective that if a person on our staff team has an emergency and needs to pull from that, they can do so without any penalty to taking out a predatory payday loan. There's no interest to pay it back. It just, you decide on what the amount is for those payments, as long as it doesn't exceed two, I believe it's two payrolls, and it doesn't exceed a 12-year span for you to pay it back. You set up your own payment terms, and then if the collective agrees with those terms, we all sign off on it, and that person doesn't have to stress out and worry and do a lot of the things that we end up having to do. And it's actually an act of, I think, care for one another. So I think that programs like that should actually be expanded on much larger scales. Because we're a part of this coalition, we could all actually consider being a part of some type of health plan together, or you can definitely merge way more resources than we have been. And so again, when I say humility, especially at an organizational level, I think it means just really showing up for one another. And again, being vulnerable enough to be open to implementing new things and sharing the information with one another of best practices and things that are working for us.
Based on the hearts popping in various places on my screen right now, people really like this, Shimekia. Huda, is there anything that you're thinking about in this regard, where we might be getting it wrong in the social movement and not having the humility about that could maybe improve that condition?
Yeah, I'm thinking about for climate disasters right now, and how we can be prepared for them, because they're coming, and how we can really center and really center trauma-informed approach when we go out and talk to the community. I mean, climate disasters are really triggering, and we need to be very sensitive when we talk about any climate impacts, and really come into the room knowing that people have those experiences that could be loss of life, loss of livelihoods. So just a centering trauma-informed approach in our activism and in our relationships, and in a multicultural way, and then moving into creating those healing spaces where we are really grounding ourselves in our histories, in ancestor knowledge, in origin stories and backgrounds, and just respecting everyone's pathways to the healing aspects, and not coming in with a one type of healing approach that can work for all. No, it does not. So we really need to allow all these different variables, different pathways, different experiences to really show and just to respect those and allow them to be shared, and because they are an inspiration for others, and we need all these experiences together to hold each other in love and care and power and light moving forward. So that's what we're trying to, because healing is part of our mission as well. So how we can move into healing. Yeah, how we can move into restoration, not just resiliency, but restoration that is grounded in our values and in our ancestor knowledge and experiences.
We appreciate that, Huda. Couple things in the chat here is that Cami is sharing inner development goals. I'm not familiar with those, but the link is in the chat. And Shimekia is saying that this is making something else pop for her. So Shimekia, what's on your mind? Oh, I think you're muted.
So Huda actually touched on one of the points that I wanted to make in terms of like where we're getting it wrong. I think that we have to be very careful, especially in like our technical spaces. So like we're talking about grid equity, and we're talking about transmission and things like that when it comes to clean energy, to make sure that we're talking about transformative strategies and not just harm reduction. Again, like sometimes the intention can be like, let's help these people so much that you don't realize like all you're doing is, all you're doing is actually just reducing the harm. You're not actually healing the harms that have been done. So wanted to just add that.